Ma.
Ma.
Awesome. My dead grandmother Gert appeared in a blinding flash of light, scaring the bejesus out of me. She came with such force that I woke up and I sat up in bed. It was like one of those moments. As her image dissipated, I said to her, Nan, next time, could you come a little more gently? Because I really want to talk to you. It's 1940. My grandmother and my grandfather, my mother and her brothers and her sister are just coming out of the Great Depression. My grandfather has 2 jobs to keep the family together. He works as a Buffalo firefighter and he works in the steel mill. On this day, my grandmother is following my grandfather around the house and she's saying, Paul, please don't go to work today. I have a really bad feeling about this. And he says to her, Gert, I have to go, we need the money. So she tries a couple more times to convince him not to go to work, but out the door he goes. As soon as he leaves, she gets the housework done. She makes sure that she has a plan for the 4 kids. She packs a bag for him with his stuff, and she waits. The phone rings, and she answers it. It's the hospital. Mrs. Rieker, we need you to come down to the hospital. Your husband's been in an accident. So she enacts the plan, she grabs the bag, and out the door she goes. When she gets to the hospital, she finds my grandfather laying in bed with a crushed leg from the hip down to the toes, and it's in traction. The hospital says to her, here's what happened. There was a steel beam coming across the steel yard, and the cables broke. And as it began to fall, my grandfather saw a man that was standing under it. So he ran and he pushed him out of the way, but he didn't get out of the way in time. When the beam fell, it actually caught his leg and crushed his leg. So my grandmother had visions her entire life. And as a child, she told me these stories over and over and over again. And especially this story about my grandfather and the steel mill. When I was 7, I started having my own visions. They were of car accidents and deaths. And I figured, well, I have the visions, I should tell people. So I would go to my family and I'd say, I saw this car accident, everybody be careful. I didn't have a whole lot of details. It was just, I knew something was going to happen. So it got to the point where when I would show up with, I had a vision, I would see the face of fear. My family just didn't know what to do with this or what to say to me. All they knew was that when I showed up with one of these visions, something was going to happen. At 14, I had one of those visions. Did what I always did. I went to everybody and said, be careful, car accident's coming. And then I was coming home on my bike at the top of the street. My older brother was mowing the lawn, and he kind of flagged me down. So I came and I stopped, and he said to me, you are such a freak. You need to go home. I said, what? Why? What? He said, you're just a freak. Go home. So I got back on my bike and went to our house, and when I pulled in the driveway, there was a rental car in the driveway. Walked in the door, and my mother met me there, and she said, everybody's okay, but your grandmother and your grandfather and your younger brother got into a car accident. At the top of the street, your grandfather, instead of stopping, somehow stepped on the gas, went straight through the house at the end of the street. So at this point, I reached this level of, I don't know what to do with this. I get these visions. They don't seem to help anybody. I get the face of fear every time I bring them up. So I shut them down. That was it. I wasn't going to have them anymore. So over the next several years as a teenager, I had an emptiness within me, and I filled it with drugs and drinking and lots of rebellion. But somewhere within me, I had this connection to my own spirit. And it was always saying, this isn't right for you. This isn't who you are. Don't do this. So I was fortunate to be able to pull myself out of these situations and come to a place where I knew was aligned with myself. So at 27, and this really great friend, and she came to me and she said, there's a class at the college on the weekend called You the Psychic. Do you want to go with me? And I was like, yes, of course I want to go with you. So we walk in, and it's just this, it's like a auditorium, and there's this guy there, and he's sort of Dungeon and Dragon-y kind of guy. He's a little warlocky, and I'm thinking, I don't know, okay. So he takes us through a couple of guided meditations, which was kind of neat. I'd never done that before. I was able to see things. I was really thinking like, oh, this is really cool. And the final piece was a psychometry exercise, which is when you hold an object and you read the energy from it. So he paired us up with somebody that we didn't know. And I was with this woman. She took a ring off of her right hand. She put it in my hand. I closed my hand around it, and I just saw. I saw an entire scene of her being angry and crying and betrayed and throwing things and just being completely and utterly devastated. And I shared this with her, and on her face, I saw the face of fear. She took her ring back. She said something really curt. She didn't even do the exercise for me. But in that moment, I decided that I was not going to shut this down, that I was not going to step back from it. And I went home and I wrote in my journal that I was going to dedicate myself to figuring out what I had, what I could do with it, and how I could use it to help people. 2 weeks later, after the psychometry experience, I had my first vision since I was 14. And it was that my grandmother was going to die. I knew I had to go home. So I packed up my bag, went down to Buffalo. My grandmother lived in the basement of my parents' home. So when I got home, I went down, I knocked on her door. She opened it, and there she stood. She was now like 4 feet tall and 80 pounds. She was the tiniest woman. She had a white blouse and a little pink skirt. And we looked at each other. And in that moment, I knew that she knew she was going to die, and she knew that I knew. So we hugged each other. We told each other that we loved each other. And we kind of left it at that. It was like the rest of the weekend, we just went along like everything was like it was. 10 days later, she died in her sleep. Which brings me to the blinding flash of light moment. About a month after the blinding flash of light, I'm falling back asleep, and I find myself in a cemetery. And there's a row of hedges. And from the other side of the hedges, I hear, "Christine, it's Nan. I'm coming around the bushes. I don't want to scare you again." And she did. she came around the bushes and, we saw each other. It was like, you. She gave me a hug. I gave her a hug. And she said, I have a really important message for you. I want you to always stand in your truth, stand in your power, and to honor the abilities that you have. And I got some messages for the family. And she went on to tell me some things that she wanted to tell the family, which were just basic, like, I'm okay, it's all right, heaven's great. So I stand here today as a spiritual teacher and a clairvoyant, having really honored the words of my grandmother to honor my abilities and to stand in my truth and to stand in my power. And it's amazing because every day I get to support people in living fully empowered and conscious lives. And I stand as a conduit between the spirit world and the physical world, sharing information that helps people to really live in this amazing way. So what I want to say to you is that I know each of you has magic in you. Each of you has some amazing ability and some beautiful power. And in the words of my grandmother, I want you to stand in your power and stand in your truth and always honor those abilities.